Good to see everyone here.
Yes, it's a beautiful day.
Welcome, brothers and sisters. Thank you.
Looking good. How's that side?
Almost done. Just securing this leg.
Great. We're making good progress.
A comment appeared under one of our recent videos. It came from a viewer in the United States, and it stopped me cold. I want to read it to you exactly as it was written, because it is the kind of testimony that opens a door. And once you walk through it, you cannot walk back. I am in the USA. Some friends from Illinois built a new hall, and it was immediately sold. Their old hall is deplorable. Our circuit raised over $5 million to build a new assembly hall, and then we were told that the misgoverning body changed their minds, but kept the money. These contributions were above and beyond our regular donations. $5 million, raised by ordinary people, families, elderly sisters on fixed incomes, young couples who sacrificed vacations and savings. All of it gone. No hall was ever built. No money was ever returned. The governing body simply kept it. And here is the question that this comment forces us to ask. Is this a local mistake? A misunderstanding between an American circuit and the organization's headquarters? Or is what happened in Illinois a window into something far larger? A deliberate, engineered, global mechanism designed to extract wealth from congregations and funnel it upward to Watchtower's leadership? In this video, you are going to understand exactly how the system works. You are going to see the precise year and the precise policy that made all of this possible. You are going to hear about a congregation in California that fought back and was destroyed for it. You are going to see how the same pattern is unfolding in France, in Germany, in Australia, and across dozens of countries right now. By the end of this video, you will not think of kingdom halls the same way again. You will see them for what they have become, not houses of worship, but assets on a corporate balance sheet. And you will understand that the people who built them, cleaned them, and paid for them with their own hands were never the owners. They never were. Subscribe now if you are not already part of this channel. Hit the notification bell, because what comes next is the kind of investigation they do not want you to watch. Part 1. The comment that started everything. Let's spend a moment with the testimony from Illinois, because it contains more layers than it first appears. The viewer, let us call her Monica, which is the name she uses, describes two separate injuries happening to the same community at roughly the same time. The first injury? A brand new Kingdom Hall was constructed. Volunteers showed up on weekends. They poured the concrete, painted the walls, installed the carpet, wired the electrical systems. This is how Jehovah's Witnesses have always built their halls, through what the organization calls volunteer labor, coordinated by the local design and construction department. Free labor, no wages paid. When the building was finished, the congregation that built it, the same men and women who gave their weekends and their backs and their hands to raise it, were not permitted to stay inside it. The hall was sold immediately, and they were sent back to their old building, which Monica describes as deplorable. Let that land for a moment. You built it. You paid for it with your own donations. You gave your physical labor for free. And then you were told to leave it, because the organization had decided to sell it to someone else and keep the proceeds. The second injury is even more staggering in its scale. The entire circuit, not just one congregation, but a collection of congregations across a geographic region, organized itself around a shared goal. They were going to build an assembly hall, a larger facility for regional gatherings, for special events, for the kind of occasions that mark the calendar of a Jehovah's Witness family. They raised $5 million. That is not a small number. That is a number that represents years of sacrifice, of extra contributions, of giving beyond what was already being given month after month to the congregation fund and to the worldwide work. And then Watchtower canceled the project. Not because the money ran out, not because of a zoning problem or a construction delay. The governing body, according to Monica's account, simply changed their minds. And the $5 million that had been donated specifically and exclusively for that assembly hall project, never built, never started, stayed with headquarters. No refund, no explanation that satisfied anyone, no accountability. This is not a rumor. This is a first-person account from someone inside the affected community. And as we are about to show you, it is not an anomaly. It is a pattern with a clear origin point, a documented architecture, and consequences that are playing out right now in congregations across the United States, Europe, Latin America, and beyond. Part 2. The policy that changed everything. May 2014. To understand what happened to Monica's community in Illinois, you have to go back to a specific moment in time. Not a vague era, a specific moment. May 2014. Before that date, the relationship between a local congregation and its kingdom hall was straightforward by the standards of any property law in the world. The congregation raised money. The congregation organized the build. The congregation held the deed. The building belonged to the people who built it and paid for it. If Watchtower provided a loan to help with construction costs, the congregation made monthly payments back to the organization, exactly as you would with any lender. The loan had a term. The loan had an end. And when it was paid off, the congregation owned its hall outright. It was imperfect. Watchtower still held enormous cultural and spiritual authority over every congregation. But legally, the property was the congregation's. May 2014 ended that. The governing body announced what they called a new arrangement. They framed it in the warm language of generosity. They told congregations that all outstanding loan balances, every dollar still owed to Watchtower for hall construction, would be forgiven, wiped clean. A gift from the faithful and discreet slave to the worldwide brotherhood. This announcement was received with enormous gratitude by rank-and-file members who had been making those payments for years. Many wept. Many praised Jehovah for the organization's generosity. The announcement was read from platforms at kingdom halls around the world, and it was met with applause. What was not applauded, because it was not presented in the same emotional register, because it was buried in the administrative language of accompanying letters sent to congregation elders, was the other half of the arrangement. In exchange for the forgiven loans, every congregation in the world was required to pass a resolution, a formal vote by the congregation body, instructing the congregation to send a fixed monthly contribution to Watchtower headquarters, not a voluntary contribution, not an amount chosen by the congregation based on what they could afford that month. A fixed amount, set by the organization, sent automatically, every month, with no end date, perpetually. And simultaneously, through the restructuring of the local design and construction department, the LDC, Watchtower reorganized the legal ownership structure of Kingdom Hall properties worldwide. Congregations were directed to transfer the deeds of their halls into entities controlled by Watchtower. In country after country, the legal title to the physical buildings moved from local congregations to national or regional entities that ultimately answer to Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. Think about the mechanics of what just happened. Watchtower forgave the loans, money it would have continued to receive over time, but which had a finite end. In exchange, it established a permanent monthly income stream from every congregation on earth, with no termination date. And it acquired legal title to the physical assets those congregations had built. It forgave a temporary debt. It gained a permanent revenue stream and the deed to the building. This is not a religious arrangement. This is a leveraged asset acquisition disguised as an act of generosity. And it was executed on a global scale in a single policy announcement in May 2014, while the people most affected were weeping with gratitude. The 2014 policy change was rolled out across the world with remarkably little resistance. That is what happens when a religious organization with total doctrinal authority over its members frames a property transfer as divine guidance. You do not question divine guidance. You do not hire a lawyer to review the resolution before you sign it. You trust, you comply, you applaud. But in Menlo Park, California, a group of elders did something different. They asked questions. The Menlo Park congregation was, by most accounts, a financially strong and independent body. Their kingdom hall was paid for. They owed Watchtower nothing. They had, over the years, built up a significant congregation bank account, the kind of financial stability that comes from decades of careful stewardship by responsible local leadership. When the 2014 instructions arrived requiring them to transfer their property and establish the mandatory monthly contribution, the elders of Menlo Park did not immediately comply. They asked for clarification. They asked about the legal implications. They asked in the careful language of men who respected the organization but also understood property rights, whether there was a way to understand this arrangement more fully before signing documents that would transfer their hall to Watchtower's control. The response from the organization was not clarification. It was not patience. It was not the pastoral care you might expect from an organization that describes itself as a spiritual family. The elders who had raised the questions were removed from their positions. The congregation itself was dissolved, formally disbanded as an organizational unit, and Watchtower, now with full legal authority over the congregation's assets under the structures put in place in 2014, took control of the congregation's bank account. The hall was subsequently sold. The community that had gathered in that building, that had cleaned it and maintained it and paid for it, was scattered. Some were absorbed into neighboring congregations, some left the organization entirely, and the money and the property went to Watchtower. And here is why the Menlo Park case matters so much in the context of what happened in Illinois. What Monica described, a congregation that builds a hall with volunteer labor only to have it sold immediately, is not organizational incompetence. It is not a mistake. The Menlo Park case shows you what happens when anyone dares to question the mechanism. The mechanism is intentional. The removal of local ownership, the transfer of title, the sale of assets, the retention of donated funds. These are features, not bugs. They are the designed outcomes of a policy built in 2014 and enforced ever since with a combination of spiritual authority and legal control. At this point, you may be thinking that we are looking at a few isolated cases, California, Illinois, and perhaps a handful of others. But the pattern is visible at scale, and it extends far beyond the borders of the United States. In France, Watchtower has been engaged in a systematic sell-off of Kingdom Hall properties for several years. Halls that were built by French Jehovah's Witnesses, with their donations, with their weekends, with their decades of service, are being listed and sold. The proceeds do not return to the local congregations. They are absorbed by the organization. And in many cases, the congregations affected are being merged, reduced, or relocated to smaller and less adequate facilities. The situation in France is not a crisis caused by declining membership alone, although membership has been declining. It is an active liquidation. Properties that were accumulated over decades are being converted into cash, and the people who built those properties are watching it happen with almost no recourse, because the 2014 policy change means that legally, those properties were never really theirs. Not anymore. The same reports are coming from Germany, from Australia, from the United Kingdom, from Canada. Former members and current members who still trust enough to speak, quietly, anonymously, in comment sections like the one where Monica left her testimony, are describing the same experience in congregation after congregation. You build it. You pay for it. You give your free labor and your fixed monthly contribution. And then one day, you are told the hall is being sold, the congregation is being restructured, and the money stays with headquarters. In the United States, the scale of Kingdom Hall sales between roughly 2014 and the present day is significant enough to have attracted attention from journalists and legal observers outside the Jehovah's Witness community. Real estate records in multiple states show Watchtower-affiliated entities selling properties that are clearly identifiable as former Kingdom Halls by their architecture, their zoning history, and their previous deed holders, often within a few years of construction or major renovation. The pattern has a specific shape. First, the LDC coordinates a construction project. Volunteers are recruited from across a circuit. They donate their labor over weekends and holidays. Local donations fund the materials. The hall is built. Legal title rests with a Watchtower-controlled entity. Then, at some point determined by headquarters, not by the congregation, the decision is made to sell. The congregation is told this is the organization's direction. They are encouraged to trust the governing body's wisdom, and the hall goes to market. The congregation either doubles up with another congregation in another building, or is given a space in a facility that is, as Monica says, deplorable. The volunteers who built it will never see a cent of what the sale generates. The donation fund that Monica's circuit raised, $5 million specifically designated for an assembly hall, will never be refunded because the organization does not refund donations. That is a principle they have articulated in their own legal filings. Donations to Watchtower are unconditional and non-returnable. Once given, they belong to the organization. So when the project is canceled and the money is kept, it is not theft in the legal sense. It is something arguably worse, a system engineered to ensure that money flows in one direction only, under a religious framework that makes questioning the flow feel like questioning God himself. There is a practice in real estate known as house flipping. You acquire a property, you invest in improvements, you sell the property at a profit. The skill involved is in keeping acquisition and improvement costs low while achieving a high sale price. The greater the gap between what you put in and what you sell for, the greater the margin. Watchtower has built one of the most sophisticated property flipping operations in the world. but it has done so with 3 structural advantages that no commercial real estate developer could ever replicate. The first advantage is zero acquisition cost. Watchtower does not buy the land in the conventional sense of using its own capital. Donations from congregation members, accumulated over time and directed by the organization toward a specific building project, pay for the land. The congregation is spiritually motivated to give generously and to give without conditions. The second advantage is free labor. The LDC volunteer program means that the construction workforce, the people who frame the walls, pour the foundation, install the plumbing, tile the bathrooms, and landscape the grounds, are not paid. They are not employees. They receive no wages, no benefits, no compensation of any kind. They are volunteers who believe they are performing sacred service for Jehovah God. In commercial construction, labor is typically the largest single cost component of a project. Watchtower has eliminated that cost entirely. The third advantage is tax exemption. Because Watchtower operates as a religious organization recognized by the Internal Revenue Service and by equivalent bodies in dozens of countries, it pays no property tax, no income tax on the proceeds from asset sales, and no capital gains tax. A commercial developer who acquired a property for a low cost, improved it with cheap labor, and sold it at a substantial profit would face a significant tax liability on that transaction. Watchtower faces none. The math is extraordinary. You acquire land with donated money. You build on it with volunteer labor. You pay no taxes on the sale. And when you sell, 100% of the proceeds above transaction costs goes to the organization, not to the community that built it, not to the donors who funded it, not to the volunteers whose weekends went into it. This is what happened to Monica's Hall in Illinois. This is what happened in Menlo Park. This is what is happening across France right now, and in Germany, and in Australia, and in dozens of other places where the pattern is playing out. And the people inside this system, the ones loading the drywall on Saturday morning, the ones writing the checks, the ones who raised $5 million because they believed they were building something lasting for their community. They are not investors. They are not partners. They are not even tenants with a lease. They are, in every practical sense, the labor force and the capital base of a real estate operation that they will never benefit from, and that will never acknowledge them as anything more than servants of an organization that has total authority over their spiritual lives. Monica's comment under our last video is one data point. But data points are how patterns become visible. What we have traced in this investigation is not speculation. The 2014 policy change is documented. The transfer of legal title from local congregations to Watchtower-controlled entities is documented. The Menlo Park situation has been described by people with direct knowledge of it. The sell-off happening across France, Germany, and Australia is visible to anyone paying attention to what is left behind when a congregation's hall disappears and the money never comes back. The organization asks its members to trust without evidence. It calls that faith. But what this investigation shows is that on the question of property, on the question of where your money goes and who controls what you build, the evidence is not supportive of that trust. The evidence points in the opposite direction. Jehovah's Witnesses are told that everything they give goes to advance the worldwide preaching work. What the record shows is that a significant portion of what they give generates a real estate margin that flows entirely to an organization that answers to no congregation, no membership body, and no external oversight of any kind. You give, you build, you clean, you pay every month, forever. And when the decision is made to sell what you built, you are not consulted, you are not compensated, and you are not even owed an explanation. That is not a spiritual arrangement. That is a business model. Now we want to hear from you. If you were a Jehovah's Witness, or if you are still inside the organization, we want to know what happened to the Kingdom Hall in your community. Was it sold? Was a project canceled and the money kept? Were your elders removed when they asked questions? Leave your story in the comments below. Your testimony is not just important for this conversation, it is evidence. And evidence, accumulated and shared, is how the pattern becomes undeniable. Share this video. Someone you know needs to see it. And stay with this channel, because the investigation is not finished.